This is Gravedigger Queen, and this is part 3 of Barton Wiley introduces Miss Kenzie Moore, spirit photographer. In this episode, Barton Wiley is checking in on his podcast and guest, Malcolm, to see if he is, in fact, a demon like he said he was. Okay, children, I'll see you at the end. When he regained his equilibrium, he wasn't sure just how long he had phased out. He couldn't be sure this happened already or was a waking dream. He shook his head to clear out the cobwebs and did some serious soul searching. Just like the so-called demon said, he had to know just how much of Malcolm was in fact real. For all he knew, Malcolm was just a run-of-the-mill Satanist looking to be edgy with an edgy gimmick. If this man had a modicum of real power, he without a doubt would root it out. Barton set his clock for a 24-hour timer as if the show start time was doomsday. Energy drinks and coffee became his allies as he used his strongest digital kung fu maneuvers to get to the bottom of this man. As he sifted through his digital footsteps, he gazed back through his mind's eye to recall just how he came to know Malcolm. He wasn't quite sure when first contact was made exactly. It almost felt like he just appeared one day and he accepted him. In poring through his background, he examined his band, and that was their intersection. The one actual piece of social media Malcolm possessed was evidence of a band 7 years ago. Barton vaguely remembered the band playing at this bar he went to once. It was good death metal, and anyone worth their salt knew that canonically Satan made the best metal bands. In that moment, he remembered that was something he mentioned in their first conversation 7 years ago. He had happened to mention to Malcolm how Satan had the best metal bands. From there, they struck up a conversation about who were the best well-hidden into society Satanists. Malcolm named so many names that it caught his attention. He hadn't thought about Malcolm for a few weeks. Then he got a high-level senator to come on his show. He accused him of some random shit Malcolm had fed him, and 2 weeks later, that senator went to jail for raping children, which was one of the epic social bullseyes he had made over the years. That was when he asked Malcolm if he wanted to riff with him on the show. Throughout the years, quite a few of their random conversations turned out to be true, which very much added to his popularity. 1 out of 10 times he was proven wrong. So in thinking back, the one notable piece of his past was the one moment their lives intersected. He found that his name may have been Malcolm Barnes. Maybe. It was hard to be sure. There may well have been people in witness protection with easier to discover past. He had to check his necessary infos that defined all or any of us as people. Social security number, phone, address, car. You couldn't even possess anything meaningful in life without those things. At least, it was inconceivable to think that someone could move through life without it. It was hard to believe that in his lifetime, there was a point in which it was socially acceptable not to have a cell phone. When nothing presented itself, there were still 2 conceivable paths that he saw as closest to true. One was that he just found a way to steal someone's identity, or 2, maybe he really was somehow a card-carrying demon. After a relatively useless session of cyber sleuthing, he tried an alternative plan B. He carried on with the show, and quite honestly, if you had put a gun to his head and asked him if the Malcolm segment seemed any different than it normally was, he couldn't tell. The only real difference was Barton felt the weight of guilt, that on some level he was part of the problem in spreading unfounded rumors. Was everything Malcolm said the truth, or some failed version of it? Or did he pepper the stories with grains of truth just to make it seem more plausible? He knew that Malcolm drove to the studio each time on a motorcycle. If he were to put a tracking device on his vehicle, he'd figure out where he spent most of his time. Barton paid a homeless man to stick a small tracker under his wheel well. When the show was just about over, Malcolm didn't mention demonic shit once, which on some level led him to believe the past day hadn't happened. They parted as they did every day, then Malcolm shot back an extremely smug and knowing gesture on exit. Barton said, "Tomorrow then?" "Yep," Malcolm spoke back simply. Barton couldn't wait to see where Malcolm ended up, but at the same time, he was terrified. Barton waited for the cover of darkness to turn on the tracker. Something about it felt more epic that way. He had to admit that this was not the first time he put on his sleuthing hat. In fact, in his younger days, he spent quite a bit of time staked out in bushes. He had since grown lazier and complacent and chose to hunt by casting nets and taking whatever he happened to snare over stalking prime targets and bringing them down. He found himself at a church of all places, but in retrospect, perhaps he shouldn't have seen it as odd. It was a church that was a bit out of city limits, that was butted up against the expressway, even though it looked a bit solitary and lonely. It had a gravel parking lot. The structure itself had the inconspicuous look of a Catholic church, but was missing all the telltale signs and symbols that would give clarification as to what it was. Barton circled the church from afar. He easily spotted sparse vehicles around the place. Barton made sure to take pictures and jot some things down just in case those vehicles belonged to anyone interesting. He wasn't sure now if the best bet was to go on foot. Seeing it was in fact a holy place, maybe he could just show an interest in joining. Or did he just want to catch them unaware and see them at their worst? It only took a heartbeat for him to consider his options. There wasn't a world he could see himself not trying to catch someone with their pants down. He assessed the contours of the building, remembering leaner times when he would shimmy up drain pipes and windowsills. Now he could see the comedic aftermath of him tumbling off the roof. The building was 4 stories with deep crevices to cloister in or easily grip. There was a bell on top, which he decided was the best point of entry over nestling himself somewhere by a stained glass mosaic. If anyone managed to step outside or drive up, he'd be hanging onto the sides like a fly on the wall. Barton secured his little backpack and started up the building, though he was losing his strength and he just barely made it up without taking a hard fall. He did, however, gasp for breath like a fish out of water. After his breathing normalized, he assessed the situation. Lucky for him, next to the bell was an unlocked trapdoor. Barton took a deep breath and entered the heart of darkness. His sight was lost to him at first, and all he could hear was the indistinct sounds of monk chants. He descended stairs in the dark until he stumbled his way onto an open door. He could feel the monk chant was a recording because there was a completely different way that sound bounced off the walls when it wasn't. The mystery door was unlocked. He pushed it open into a somewhat finished attic. He could see structural beams of wood and rafters. There were a few beds up there, but they were modest and only a step above cots. The sounds of the chanting monks grew louder, beckoning him to continue. There were no people on the upper levels, so he snuck as quietly as a church mouse. The second floor led out into a balcony up high that was bathed in darkness. From the shadows, he could see down below the church lit bright by candlelight. Everyone in service was naked, bearing themselves before their God. There was a woman lying down on a sacrificial altar, complacent as cattle. The high priest conducting the service wore an elaborate mask that was a depiction of a bull. From what Barton could see, he thought it may well have been, at one time, a living bull that was taxidermied. The layout of the church was rather interesting, and if one could call it anything, one might mistake it for a Catholic church with 2 key differences. Everyone was nude, and scattered bits of unholy artifacts lay out, upside-down crosses, and iconography of demons painted as unspoken saints. Barton didn't hesitate any longer and began filming with his camera. The congregation wasn't overly huge, it barely filled a fifth of the place. The rites master hopped onto the altar with the nude woman and began having sex. When he started, it urged everyone else to begin. Some of them started at pews, while some of them came up to the front and did their business at the feet of their rites master. This orgy went on for a while, so much so Barton was starting to think there wasn't much more to this group as a whole. Someone who must have started under the balcony that Barton was under brought in a live chicken, holding it in her hand. When the chicken bearer got close to the biggest confluence of people, she took a knife from her hair and stabbed the bird. She drizzled the blood over the flock like syrup to ice cream. The blood seemed to strengthen the bunch and fill them with an unnatural glee. This in some way filled Barton with a measure of glee himself, because it validated the waiting and effort he put into this operation. The demonic congregation seemed to be energized by the blood and redoubled their efforts at sexual congress. It didn't take but a minute before it escalated. The head priest in the bull mask bit into the woman he bedded with unholy, jagged teeth. It took a moment for Barton to register the assault because of all the blood and bliss. The woman was being devoured, and she wasn't even in distress. The Minotaur was bigger than before, somehow more real than before. Its bulbous, oversized head now fit its muscular body. Barton felt as if his eyes were moving, not as part of a lifeless costume, but that of the beast it was meant to portray. Barton was nearly too scared to move, though he wasn't sure if it was because of fear for his life or the fear of missing the gruesome footage. The savagery continued, and Barton couldn't look away. His face was held in a mute scream. The congregation joined in the feast when the newly born beast set the example of flesh for food. Barton turned his phone around and began dialing 911, though he doubted very highly there was anything they could do for that woman other than justice for her murder. The congregation gorged on flesh, and it was only now that their victim made yelps of pain. 911, what is the nature of your emergency? Said a calm and businesslike woman on the other end. Ma'am, I'm on the balcony of a church out on the outskirts of the city. The church congregation is eating a woman. Eating a woman, you say? The operator said in a calm but slightly incredulous tone. Yes, eating. I know how it sounds. Please send someone as quick as you can, and if you don't believe me, you can arrest me. Okay, sir. Just stay on the line. Are you in danger? Yes, an extreme amount. You don't need to talk. Just stay on the line. We're sending people down. Barton thought he saw the woman expire, but he had no way to tell. Her body was pink and unrecognizable, but her face was untouched. The woman who had been the chicken bearer came out of hiding again and whispered something into the Minotaur's ear. Its bull ear twitched at the sound. With a face caked red with blood, it lifted its head and smelled the air. Barton tried to shrink himself because he felt the instincts prey possessed when a predator was afoot. The Minotaur no longer had feet like a human man. It was upright, but crooked and cloven. It looked directly at the balcony that Barton hid in, but he didn't believe he saw him. He couldn't have seen him. He couldn't have seen him. The Minotaur charged very quickly and leapt in the air. The creature defied gravity, and why wouldn't it? It defied all other laws of nature. The beast landed almost next to Barton, and its hooves made a thunderous boom. Barton fell down from the awesome force.
Barton?
The beast said in a deep and unnatural voice. Barton noticed something in the inflection, if not the voice itself. Malcolm, Barton said as he scrambled towards the door he came in from. The Minotaur charged to intercept him, but fumbled when he reached for a grab. Barton was filled with adrenaline and running faster than he ever had. His brain wasn't firing on all cylinders, and he couldn't see the forest for the trees. When he passed through the dark, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the beast at his back. The two ran up the steps of the winding bell tower. In the dark, Barton came to the clear conclusion he was not going to make it. Even if he somehow managed to slip the beast's grasp, all that would await him was a 4-story drop and a mob of Satanists. He sparked his phone to life, even though it completely gave away his position. He never thought in his wildest dreams anything important would hinge on how fast his fingers fluttered to send a text. Cutting through the oppressive darkness was the muscular hand of the man-beast. It lifted him with one arm and forced him to the light of the moon through the trapdoor.
Give it to me,
Malcolm said in his big, booming voice. Barton stretched his arm away as far as it could go. Put me down and we'll talk, Barton pled with a slight glimmer of confidence. Malcolm held Barton over the edge of the church with one massive arm. The wind roared between them, cutting into their conversation.
What are you doing, Barton?
Malcolm said. Sending this footage of you psychos to my Twitter.
Why would you want to do that, Barton? I already told you that if you play along, you will be in our good graces. We will even give you truth from time to time.
So either accept your version of the truth or what? Die?
I mean, it didn't have to be die, Barton, but you sort of backed me into a corner, didn't you?
All I have to do is push this button and your entire operation is done.
And all I have to do is unclench my fist and you're done. So, I believe we're at an impasse.
If I were to give you this phone, what are the chances you'd let me go?
Very good. I already told you powers greater than I have designs for you. If you give it over, nothing has changed. But if you push that button, you'll die, and you'll have done very little to have stopped us. You are one cosmic speck of dust on the body of a titan. You will cause no grand stir, and in fact, I doubt you'd even get people to believe what they're seeing. If you stay with us, at least you'll get to control the narrative.
Malcolm took a deep breath as if he had come to a decision. He had to believe that truth was truth, and in the end, if you couldn't even tell the truth, what was the point? If he was part of manufacturing a version of the truth, what was reality? What was even real? He pushed send. Malcolm sighed deeply and let Barton go, disgusted he even bothered with him. Barton felt an odd sense of freedom falling through the air, and it didn't have anything to do with being unbound to gravity. He felt that if nothing else, he did something. He did his part and woke people up. There was a sharp pain, then blackness. Barton woke in a hospital room. He was covered head to toe in bandages like the Universal Pictures mummy. He couldn't move because the cast froze him in place. He wasn't paralyzed because even the slightest movement caused him unspeakable pain. He saw the short, dark-haired woman, Jet, pop into his vision. "You're awake, thank God. I'll get the nurse." "No, wait," Barton said through painful breaths. "Did you get my message? Did you see it? Did everyone see it?" Jet smiled. "Yeah, they did." "What happened afterwards?" "What do you mean exactly?" Jet questioned. "Did they get arrested? Are they done?" "Some of them, yes. The police are saying the Bullman is a special effect. Though there was a body, no one knows if it will stand up in a court of law." Barton was a bit dejected. In some ways, it might have just been better to die thinking he had gone to his doom a hero. "What about Malcolm?" "Malcolm? Oh, I'll get him," Jet said, getting up before Barton could protest otherwise. Before Barton could form words or thoughts of terror, Malcolm confidently walked into the room. "What were you trying to prove, Barton?" he said in his mundane man voice. Before he could answer, Barton pulled out his phone. "Lemon Squeeze 66. The bull is fact. Keith Roro. I think he might have been on to something, and they silenced him. Katana Grandma. I think Peter Jackson did it better." "I could go on," said Malcolm while putting his phone back in his pocket. "You're looking for the truth when there is no truth anymore. You can't believe what you hear or see. So what does that lead us back to, Barton? Faith. Everyone is shaping their own realities built on belief. So, Barton, are you going to be the liar or the lied to?" All right, people, Gravedigger Queen here. I guess the devil made me do it. I'd have to say, children, there is some truth to this. What is real and what is fantasy? I mean, we see all types of shit on the internet that we just overlook as bullshit. If you really want to invest in truth, invest in death, children. That ain't never a lie. Don't worry, children. I'll see you soon enough. Night.